Tonight's episode is something gentle, something calm and slow, and if you enjoy this kind of quiet storytelling, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely feels right to you. And if you'd like, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see how many different corners of the world meet here for these late-night journeys. Now, dim the lights a bit, maybe let a fan hum in the background, and let your space ease into stillness. When you're ready, just let the story begin to form in your mind. Imagine yourself in ancient Greece, a place where sunlight touches white marble walls and everything smells faintly of olive oil, dust, and warm bread. The air feels dry but alive, buzzing with chatter, sandals scraping against stone, merchants calling out prices in the market, and somewhere nearby, a philosopher arguing about whether reality even exists. And here's something you might not expect. The Greeks really cared about staying clean. Not in the modern way of long showers and fancy body washes, but in a deeper, almost spiritual way. For them, being clean wasn't just about removing dirt. It was about balance, virtue, respect. It was something that connected the body, the mind, and even the gods. Life back then wasn't easy. Dusty streets, no running water, and not a single bar of scented soap in sight. If you wanted to wash, you warmed water over a fire, poured it from a clay jug, and let it run over your skin. Yet somehow, people managed to stay surprisingly fresh, and more importantly, they believed cleanliness made them better humans. To the Greeks, dirt wasn't only physical. It could be moral. They had a word for spiritual pollution, miasma. You could carry it from a bad action, an impurity, or even skipping ritual washing. Being unclean meant being out of harmony with the divine. So washing wasn't just hygiene, it was resetting the soul. Before entering temples, people washed their hands and feet. Not because of germs, but because the gods expected purity. Water had the power to wipe away invisible weight, to cleanse not just the skin, but the spirit. And since they didn't have soap, the Greeks turned to olive oil. They covered their skin with it, then scraped it away with a curved bronze tool called a strigil. It removed sweat, dust, and old oil all at once, their version of a spa treatment, but wrapped in meaning. Athletes, soldiers, philosophers, all used a strigil. After wrestling or training, or even after a long day of talking and thinking, they oiled themselves and scraped everything off. It was discipline. A small daily promise to care for the body, and through it, the soul. In the gymnasium, a place literally named from the Greek word gymnos, meaning naked, men trained in the open air. Running, wrestling, throwing the discus, and afterward, they performed that same cleansing ritual. Clean body, calm mind, that was the Greek ideal. Women had their own peaceful rituals at home. Warming water in clay pots, adding herbs like thyme or lavender, washing slowly in their courtyards, and finishing with fragrant oils. This wasn't vanity. It was comfort. It was devotion. Soft skin meant softness of spirit. Pale, clean skin reflected purity and peace. Even the simplest wash felt like a small ceremony. Doctors like Hippocrates believed cleanliness kept the body's four humors in balance, that bathing, oiling, and caring for the body kept sickness away and kept the mind steady. A clean body meant a peaceful spirit. A peaceful spirit meant harmony. Imagine a morning in Athens. The sun rising. A man walking to the gymnasium with his oil flask and strigil. Training until he's covered in dust and sweat. Then washing it all off, refreshing his skin, clearing his thoughts. Meanwhile, at home, a woman prepares her bath, washing with warm water and herbs while the scent of flowers drifts around her. Even philosophers had opinions. Some mocked those who spent too long grooming. Others said cleansing the body was a symbol of cleansing the soul. The Greeks understood that washing away dirt also washed away heaviness, confusion, and excess. So as you picture this ancient world, marble courtyards, warm breezes, the quiet echo of footsteps, imagine people not just surviving, but trying to live with grace. They bathed in sunlight, in olive oil, and in meaning. This is where our story truly begins. In a land of gods, thinkers, and dreamers, where the act of washing was not about dirt, but about devotion. And now, let's step deeper into that world, gently, slowly, and begin our journey. You know, for the ancient Greeks, taking a bath wasn't just about washing off the sweat and dust of the day, it was almost a spiritual experience. They didn't think of cleanliness as just soap and water. Nope. For them, being clean was a way to feel balanced, pure, and connected to something divine. Bathing was philosophy. Literally. Imagine this, a young Athenian waking up at dawn, stretching his arms toward the rising sun, and then heading out not just to scrub off yesterday's dirt, but to cleanse his soul. That's the kind of poetic relationship they had with water. Public baths, or as they called them, balneae, were the heart of this experience. These weren't your fancy marble Roman spas with fountains and heated pools. The Greek balneae were smaller, often carved into stone, dimly lit, and filled with the earthy smell of steam and oil. Inside, you'd find a few shallow basins of warm water, benches along the wall, and people chatting about philosophy, politics, or who cheated during the last Olympic race. Bathing wasn't just hygiene, it was community. It was where citizens met after a long day at the gymnasium, where soldiers washed away the dust of the battlefield, and where thinkers like Socrates could probably be found talking about virtue, half naked and dripping with olive oil. And yes, olive oil was basically their version of body wash, shampoo, and moisturizer combined. Greeks didn't use soap like we do today. Instead, they'd coat themselves in oil, thick, golden, fragrant, and then scrape it off using a small curved metal tool called a strigil. That process pulled away sweat, dirt, and dead skin, leaving them smooth and shining. It sounds weird now, but honestly, it was kind of genius. Oil lifted dirt without drying out the skin, and after a day of wrestling or running under the sun, it must have felt incredible. Plus, it left a glow that screamed healthy and civilized. There was also this idea that purity of the body reflected purity of the soul. Before sacrifices at temples or big festivals, people would bathe to show respect to the gods. You couldn't just show up to offer a goat to Zeus covered in grime, that would be rude. Cleanliness was part of worship. It was believed that if you were unclean, the gods might actually reject your prayers. And before philosophical debates or big gatherings, washing up was a ritual to prepare the mind. The Greeks believed a clear body helped lead to a clear mind. Kind of like how today, some people feel like they can't think straight until they've had their morning shower. But let's not pretend everyone had equal access to this ritual luxury. Most ordinary Greeks didn't have private bathrooms at home. The poor relied on public baths, streams, or even buckets of water fetched from communal wells. Private baths were rare, a privilege of the wealthy. If you were rich enough, you might have a small stone tub in your courtyard, filled by servants with water warmed over a fire. That was peak ancient luxury. For the rest, a quick dip in the sea or a splash from a jug was the best they could do. Yet, even then, the meaning was the same. Whether you were a fisherman or a philosopher, washing meant renewal, a small daily act of self-respect. Now, when it came to how men and women bathed, things got interesting. Men usually bathed in the gymnasium after working out. Picture rows of athletes glistening in the sun, scraping off oil and dust while bragging about who ran fastest or lifted the heaviest stone. It was social, loud, and a bit competitive, because of course it was. Women, on the other hand, had a more private relationship with bathing. In many cities, they had their own separate bathing spaces, often smaller and more discreet. Wealthy women might bathe at home, surrounded by servants, perfumes, and scented oils. They turned bathing into an art of beauty and elegance. It wasn't just cleansing, it was preparation, for a feast, for a festival, or for daily life in a world that expected them to always look graceful. And perfumes. The Greeks were obsessed with scents. They mixed oils with flowers, herbs, and spices, jasmine, myrrh, rose, and even cinnamon. After bathing, they'd anoint themselves with these oils not just to smell good, but to show refinement. Smelling good was like wearing a badge of civilization. For men, though, perfume was a bit of a debate. Some philosophers thought too much scent made a man soft. The famous lawmaker Solon even warned that men who used too much perfume were probably wasting too much time indoors. Still, that didn't stop the trend, because who doesn't want to smell like a bouquet after a long day of training? There was also this deeper idea running through Greek culture, that the act of washing could wash away more than dirt. It could wash away guilt, failure, or emotional heaviness. Water symbolized rebirth. After wars, survivors bathed as a sign of moving forward. After funerals, families washed to purify themselves from the touch of death. It was part of their spiritual hygiene, a belief that life itself was a cycle of cleansing and renewal. When you think about it, their entire idea of bathing was tied to the way they saw the world, body, mind, and spirit all connected. To be clean wasn't just about looking presentable, it was about being in harmony with yourself and the universe. Of course, the Greeks weren't always spotless. Public baths could get crowded and, let's be honest, a little funky. There were no water filters, no chlorine. And sometimes, people complained that others reused bath water or left oil floating on top. So yeah, even in ancient times, people had to deal with EU moments. Still, what stands out is how seriously they took the concept of being clean, not as vanity, but as virtue. A clean person was seen as disciplined, respectful, and in tune with the divine order. And maybe that's something we've kind of lost today, when showers are more about speed and convenience than reflection. So next time you step into the shower, maybe take a moment. Think of the Greeks, the philosophers rinsing off their thoughts, the athletes scraping off their victories, and the priests washing before facing the gods. For them, every drop of water meant something. Bathing wasn't just a routine. It was a ritual. A small, sacred pause in the chaos of life, a moment to feel human, clean, and maybe even a little closer to the divine. In the warm, sunlit valleys of Greece, the olive tree was more than a plant. It was a symbol of life itself. Every branch, every fruit, carried a sacred weight. To the Greeks, the olive was a divine gift, a link between mortal hands and the wisdom of the gods. Long before the invention of soap, olive oil reigned as the ultimate cleanser. It was smooth, golden, and gentle on the skin. When mixed with fine sand or ashes, it became a natural scrub. The oil would lift away dirt and sweat, while leaving behind a soft, fragrant sheen. After long days in dusty streets or heated gymnasiums, Greeks turned to oil not just to clean themselves, but to restore balance, to return their bodies to harmony with nature. The process was elegant in its simplicity. A person would pour a small amount of oil over their skin, massaging it until it covered every inch. Then came the tool that defined Greek cleanliness, the strigil. A small, curved piece of bronze or iron, shaped like a crescent moon. With a slow, practiced motion, it was drawn across the skin, scraping away a thin layer of oil, sweat, and dust. This mixture of grime and oil was known as gloios, a sticky residue that told the story of one's day, effort, movement, and toil. Yet when it was scraped away, the skin underneath gleamed with freshness. Even more fascinating, the gloios from athletes were sometimes collected, mixed with perfumes, and sold as medicine. To touch the residue of an Olympic champion was to touch victory itself. In the gymnasiums of Athens, the ritual was almost theatrical. After hours of training, athletes would gather in open courtyards, their bodies glistening under the sun. Assistants, often young servants or fellow athletes, would anoint them with oil before they began their exercises. The oil prevented chafing, softened the skin, and made every movement fluid and graceful. When the training ended, the scraping began, a slow, methodical process that left the air heavy with the scent of olives and sweat. It was more than hygiene. It was art. The Greeks saw beauty in the human form, and oil brought that beauty to life. The smooth, shining skin of a well-trained body reflected health, strength, and divine favor. In their eyes, to care for the body was to honor the gods who shaped it. Among all gods, the olive tree was most sacred to Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare. According to legend, She gifted the olive tree to Athens during her contest with Poseidon. Poseidon offered the people a saltwater spring, but Athena's olive tree promised food, light, and cleansing oil. The Athenians chose her gift, and in return, the goddess blessed the city with her name. From that day onward, the olive tree became a sacred emblem, a living reminder that purity and wisdom often came from the same root. Olive oil also carried deep symbolic meaning. It was poured on the heads of kings during coronations, used to anoint newborns, and applied to the bodies of the dead. In every stage of life, birth, glory, and death, olive oil marked the human journey. To bathe in it was to align oneself with the divine, to wash away the dust of mortality and reveal the eternal soul beneath. Beyond its spiritual use, olive oil was a foundation of the Greek economy. Vast groves stretched across the hillsides of Attica, Crete, and the Peloponnese. Families tended to these trees for generations, each harvest bringing not only sustenance but also wealth. Olive oil filled amphorae, large clay jars, which merchants carried across the Mediterranean. From Athens to Egypt, from Sicily to Asia Minor, Greek oil was prized for its purity and fragrance. It lit lamps in foreign temples and perfumed the skin of nobles in distant lands. In the marketplace, the oil's quality was tested by sight and scent. A golden hue meant freshness, a rich aroma meant divinity. Some oils were infused with herbs, thyme, rosemary, or rose petals, turning them into early forms of luxury cosmetics. Others were pressed purely for ritual, sealed and stored in sacred vessels. Through this humble liquid, Greece found both beauty and identity. Olive oil connected the sacred and the mundane, the personal and the public, the body and the spirit. Every drop carried a fragment of Athena's wisdom and the sun of the Aegean sky. When the day's dust settled and the city quieted, people would cleanse themselves not just to remove the soil of labor, but to remember their place in a world crafted by gods and nature alike. The oil that shimmered on their skin was not only a cleanser, it was history, culture, and faith in liquid form. In the gentle glow of oil lamps, their bodies gleamed like bronze statues. Clean, anointed, and at peace, they carried forward a ritual that defined an entire civilization, the Greek way of staying clean, pure, and beautifully human. If there was one thing the ancient Greeks loved almost as much as beauty itself, it was smell. To them, a pleasant scent wasn't just a luxury, it was a mark of civilization, of refinement, of being truly human. A fragrant person was considered pure, healthy, and even favored by the gods. And if you happened to walk through a Greek city on a warm morning, you might have caught a faint mixture of olive oil, crushed flowers, and something sweetly spicy lingering in the air. That was Greece's perfume, natural, handmade, and sacred. The Greeks didn't have bottles of alcohol-based perfumes like we do today. Their art of fragrance was much more ancient and earthy. They made perfumes by infusing flowers, herbs, and resins into olive oil. It was a patient process, often taking days or even weeks. First, the ingredients were dried under the sun, then gently crushed and soaked in warm oil until the aroma became rich and lasting. The result was thicker than modern perfume, more like a scented balm than a mist. But that was the beauty of it. The fragrance didn't burst out, it lingered, soft and warm, like a whisper. Roses were among the Greeks' favorites. They believed the rose was born from the tears of Aphrodite herself, mixed with the blood of her beloved Adonis. The smell of roses, therefore, was more than pleasant, it was divine. Myrrh and frankincense were also beloved, often imported at great cost from Arabia and Egypt. Myrrh was believed to have purifying powers, while frankincense was reserved for temples and sacred ceremonies. Then there was iris, with its faint violet sweetness, and cinnamon, brought from far-off lands, used to perfume both the skin and the air during feasts. Each scent carried meaning. A person wearing rose oil might be invoking Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Someone anointed with laurel oil was thought to please Apollo, god of light, music, and healing. A drop of ivy or wine-scented oil might be an offering to Dionysus, god of pleasure and madness. In this way, fragrance became a form of communication with the gods, a silent prayer carried on the wind. Perfume wasn't just for smelling nice. It was part of Greek medicine, magic, and ritual. Healers believed that scent could influence the body and mind. A sick person might be rubbed with oil infused with thyme or oregano to draw out fever. Women burned lavender and myrtle to calm the spirit. Soldiers returning from battle anointed their wounds with rose oil to heal faster, and maybe to forget the smell of war. The line between medicine and luxury was thin, and the Greeks didn't bother to separate them. Of course, not everyone smelled equally divine. Perfume was also a symbol of wealth. The rich could afford exotic oils and spices from distant lands, stored in carved alabaster jars and painted amphorae. Their perfumes were strong and complex, mixtures of multiple flowers, resins, and spices. The poor, on the other hand, might make do with local herbs, maybe mint, bay, or wild thyme, mixed into plain olive oil. The result was simpler but still pleasant, because even the humblest Greek took pride in being clean and fragrant. There was even a touch of class snobbery in the air, quite literally. A person who smelled too strong might be mocked as pretentious or effeminate. But one who smelled of sweat or neglect was seen as uncultured, almost barbaric. The trick was balance, to be scented but not suffocating, polished but not artificial. The Greeks valued moderation in all things, and that included their perfumes. Perfume was also part of the art of seduction. A man might anoint his neck and wrists before meeting someone special. Women perfumed their hair and clothes, letting the scent linger in the air as they passed. The famous courtesans of Athens were known for using expensive oils from the island of Cyprus, oils said to make men dizzy with desire. In Greek poetry, a woman's fragrance was often described as more powerful than her beauty. It wasn't just what you saw that mattered, it was what you smelled, what you felt when she walked by. Even in death, perfume played its role. The bodies of the deceased were washed with scented oils before burial, wrapped in linen, and surrounded by flowers. The Greeks believed that fragrance connected the mortal and divine worlds, that it guided the soul on its way, wrapping it in purity and peace. A life well lived, they said, left behind not riches or monuments, but a good scent, a fragrance remembered by others. Perfume also shaped daily routines. After the bath, people oiled their skin lightly to keep it soft and supple. Athletes used scented oils before training, while philosophers might apply a subtler fragrance before gatherings. Even homes were perfumed, through burning herbs, hanging garlands, or rubbing aromatic oils onto floors and doors. In temples, priests would pour oil over statues of gods, filling the air with the scent of holiness. Interestingly, Greeks didn't see fragrance as gendered the way we do now. Men and women often used the same oils. What mattered wasn't whether it was masculine or feminine, but whether it was fitting for the occasion. A man might wear a bold, spicy oil for festivals and a mild, floral one for quiet gatherings. A woman might use strong cinnamon during winter and sweet rose during spring. It was a kind of poetic expression, a way of matching the body to the season, the spirit, or even the company. And if you think they overdid it, well, some did. Comic playwrights of Athens often poked fun at perfume lovers. There were jokes about young men who spent more time oiling their hair than studying philosophy, or about ladies who could be smelled before they were seen. But behind the humor was admiration too. The Greeks knew the power of a good scent. It lifted the spirit, marked celebration, soothed pain, and turned ordinary days into something almost sacred. Perfume, in ancient Greece, was never just perfume. It was love, faith, health, beauty, and memory, all mixed into one bottle of golden oil. A few drops could make a man feel closer to the gods or remind him of someone he loved. The scent of myrrh could fill a temple with holiness, while the fragrance of rose could turn a simple evening into a divine experience. So when we think of ancient Greece, of marble statues, white tunics, and sunny courtyards, we should also imagine the invisible world of fragrance that surrounded it all. Every breeze carried a story, of roses for Aphrodite, laurel for Apollo, and cinnamon for mortals who wished to smell just a little like the gods. Long before the Romans made bathing a grand daily event, the Greeks were already experimenting with the art of communal cleansing. The first Greek bathhouses, called balneae, appeared centuries before the massive Roman thermae. They were simpler, smaller, and humbler, but they carried the same purpose: to wash, to relax, and to connect. In ancient Greece, to bathe was to belong, to be part of the rhythm of the city. These early bathhouses were often built near gymnasiums or sanctuaries. Imagine small, stone-walled chambers with round basins in the center, steam curling through the air, and faint echoes bouncing off the marble. Some offered cold baths, the frigid aria of their day, while others had warm pools heated by wood fires beneath the floors. The technology was clever, if a bit primitive. Hot air circulated under raised stones, warming the water above. It was simple but effective, and in the right light, with mist drifting through the room, it must have looked almost otherworldly. The bathhouses were divided by time and gender. Men usually bathed in the morning or afternoon, while women were given their hours later in the day. In larger cities like Athens or Corinth, there were even separate bathhouses altogether. Privacy wasn't the goal, modesty mattered, but communal life mattered more. Bathing was social. People chatted, shared news, exchanged ideas, and yes, sometimes gossiped. The baths were a kind of ancient cafe, except instead of sipping coffee, you soaked in warm water and talked philosophy. The atmosphere was lively. Steam clouded the air, water splashed, and conversations blended into a constant murmur. You could hear debates about politics, the latest poetry, or who won at the last athletic games. You might even overhear someone bragging about his olive oil supplier or complaining about the rising cost of perfume. The scent of oil and herbs filled the room, rosemary, thyme, or mint, mixed with the faint mineral tang of the water itself. It was warm, humid, and deeply human. Bathing wasn't just about getting clean. It was about feeling renewed. The Greeks believed that water had purifying power, physical and spiritual. To wash away dirt was to wash away fatigue and, in some sense, moral impurity. Before religious ceremonies or sacrifices, it was common to cleanse in a public bath or fountain. Clean skin meant clean spirit, a body worthy to stand before the gods. Still, not everyone admired this growing obsession with public baths. Some philosophers, especially the older, stricter ones, were deeply skeptical. They thought too much bathing made people soft. The famous cynic Diogenes once mocked bathgoers, saying they washed away their sweat but not their arrogance. To him, true purity came from the mind, not the body. Others complained that the bathhouses had become places of vanity, filled with people oiling, perfuming, and admiring themselves in polished bronze mirrors. Effeminate, they muttered, shaking their heads at the sight of men fussing over their skin. But the younger generation saw things differently. To them, bathing was a pleasure, a reward after hard work. Athletes used baths to relax their muscles after long training sessions. Workers went to refresh themselves before meals. Even scholars sometimes visited to clear their minds before debate. And in the evenings, when the heat of the day faded, the baths glowed softly from the light of oil lamps. You could almost picture the scene. Water glimmering gold, laughter echoing, and a slow, steady calm settling over the place. Unlike the massive Roman bath complexes that came later, complete with libraries, gardens, and dining halls, Greek bathhouses were intimate. Most had a few small rooms, each with a round basin or a simple tub carved from stone. The water was carried in by hand or drawn from nearby springs. Attendants helped pour warm water over bathers using jugs, and when it cooled, they would replace it. It was a shared, cooperative experience, the kind of thing that reminded you life was a communal effort, not a private escape. Bathing also revealed something about Greek values. To them, the body was not something to be ashamed of. It was divine art, to be admired, cared for, and celebrated. The human form, sculpted and strong, reflected the gods themselves. Keeping it clean wasn't vanity, it was respect. To neglect your body was to disrespect the gift of life. So, while philosophers argued about excess, ordinary people continued to bathe, scrape, and oil themselves without guilt. The bathhouses became symbols of the Greek approach to balance, saphrosine, as they called it, moderation in all things. Too much dirt was neglect, but too much perfume was indulgence. The goal was harmony. You left the bathhouse not sparkling like a gem but glowing gently, calm and refreshed. You were clean, yes, but also grounded, ready to return to the world. Over time, the popularity of bathhouses spread across Greece. Cities competed to build more elegant ones. Corinth was said to have bathhouses with mosaics of dolphins and sea nymphs. In Athens, marble benches lined the walls, where men reclined and chatted after washing. Some bathhouses even played soft music from flutes or lyres as bathers soaked, perhaps one of the earliest examples of a spa soundtrack. There were, of course, rumors and scandals. The baths sometimes became places for flirtation or mischief. Poets and comedians loved to joke about it. But for the most part, they were places of calm routine. Ordinary citizens, soldiers, and travelers all gathered to wash away the dust of the road or the tension of the day. There was something democratic about it. In the bath, everyone was equal, stripped of status, titles, and fine clothes. Just skin, warmth, and conversation. As centuries passed, the bathhouse culture evolved. The Romans would later expand it into a vast institution, turning bathing into a national obsession. But its roots, the simple joy of water, oil, and companionship, belonged to the Greeks. They discovered that cleanliness could be more than habit. It could be a way to connect, to your body, to your community, and to something quietly divine. So the next time you step into a warm bath or shower after a long day, imagine for a moment that you're standing in an ancient Balanean. Steam rises around you, the marble floor cool beneath your feet, and someone nearby is probably discussing philosophy while rinsing off olive oil. You close your eyes, breathe in the faint scent of herbs, and realize, the Greeks knew exactly what they were doing. In ancient Greece, water was more than a simple necessity. It was a divine gift, clear, flowing, and sacred. Every drop carried a whisper from the gods, every spring was believed to have a spirit watching over it. Cleanliness wasn't just about removing dirt, it was about staying in harmony with nature and pleasing the divine powers that controlled it. But how did a civilization built thousands of years ago, with marble cities and bustling marketplaces, manage to stay clean without the plumbing and technology we take for granted today? The answer lies in one of the most overlooked marvels of Greek ingenuity, their hidden water infrastructure. Let's start with something simple. Where did all that water come from? In a land of dry summers and rocky soil, Greece had to get creative. Many city-states were built around natural springs and rivers. Athens, for example, drew its lifeblood from underground aquifers and channels that carried water from nearby hills. Engineers used terracotta pipes, long, hollow tubes that connected fountains, wells, and homes. These systems were simple but surprisingly effective. They carried water across uneven terrain using gravity alone, letting nature do most of the work. Imagine walking through Athens in the 5th century BCE. You'd hear the faint trickle of water from a stone fountain at the corner of a street. Children might be playing near it, splashing their hands. Women would gather there to fill clay jugs, chatting softly about the day's market. And priests, preparing for a ritual, would scoop the same water to purify sacred vessels. That sound of running water was the heartbeat of the city, constant, calm, and vital. In some cities like Corinth and Samos, the Greeks built impressive aqueducts, elevated stone channels that carried water across valleys. The tunnel of Eupalinos in Samos, built in the 6th century BCE, remains one of the greatest engineering feats of the ancient world. Dug straight through a mountain from both ends, it met perfectly in the middle, a miracle of geometry and precision, done without modern tools. That tunnel brought fresh spring water into the city and powered its fountains and baths. Bathhouses depended on this steady flow. Public baths, or balneae, needed a reliable water source to fill their stone basins. Some were designed so the water flowed continuously, preventing stagnation and keeping the baths fresh. Wastewater drained away through underground clay pipes, an early form of sanitation that kept cities from reeking like so many others in the ancient world. But water wasn't just about cleanliness. It was sacred. Springs, wells, and rivers were thought to be inhabited by naiads, water nymphs, and offering a prayer or a garland before drawing water was common practice. In Delphi, for instance, pilgrims bathed in the Castalian spring before approaching the temple of Apollo. They believed it purified their minds as well as their bodies, preparing them to hear the oracle's words. Athletes, too, had their ritual baths. Before entering the gymnasium or competing in the games, they often washed in cool spring water to refresh the body and spirit. After training, they would bathe again, scraping oil and dust from their skin, not only to clean themselves but also to honor the gods who watched over athletic contests. In some towns, water distribution even reflected social class. The wealthy had access to private cisterns or small fountains inside their homes, while the poor relied on public wells or communal baths. But in a society that valued public life, water brought people together. It wasn't hidden behind doors, it was shared, visible, and celebrated. Religious festivals often featured cleansing rituals, too. Before sacrifices or temple processions, Citizens would wash their hands and sometimes their entire bodies in sacred water. The idea was simple: you couldn't approach the gods in a state of impurity. Clean skin meant a clean spirit. And yet, despite their engineering genius, water in Greece wasn't infinite. Droughts were common, and cities sometimes had to ration supply. In such times, fountains would run dry, and people would queue at the few remaining wells. This made water management a civic responsibility. Inspectors, known as hydrophiliacs, were appointed to oversee distribution and prevent misuse. It shows how deeply the Greeks respected water, not just as a resource but as a moral and social duty. Now imagine a Greek garden, not lush like those of Persia, but modest and tranquil. A single fountain murmurs at its center. It's not there for show. The sound of flowing water was soothing, meditative. Philosophers like Epicurus spoke of the simple pleasures of hearing water trickle, feeling its coolness on the skin, watching it catch sunlight. To the Greeks, water was beauty, balance, and peace, all in motion. Even rivers carried their legends. The Ilissos River near Athens was once the gathering spot for thinkers and poets. Plato wrote about strolling there with his companions, discussing love, virtue, and the soul, the water murmuring softly nearby. To bathe in such a river wasn't just a matter of hygiene, it was a spiritual connection to the land and its myths. Every drop that flowed through Greek hands told a story, of craftsmanship, faith, and daily life intertwined. Whether it ran through stone channels beneath the streets or bubbled from sacred springs, water bound their cities together. It sustained their rituals, cleansed their bodies, and reflected their philosophy, that purity wasn't a condition but a way of living. So the next time you see a simple fountain or hear the gentle sound of running water, think of ancient Greece, of marble baths filled by hidden pipes, of priests washing before sacred rites, of philosophers lost in thought beside a river. For the Greeks, water wasn't just a tool. It was a quiet miracle, one that flowed through their hands, their homes, and their hearts. For the ancient Greeks, being clean was more than just looking presentable, it was a matter of divine respect. You couldn't simply stroll into a temple after a long, dusty walk or touch a sacred statue without preparing yourself first. Cleanliness was seen as a way to honor the gods, to separate the ordinary from the holy. Every drop of water, every wash of the hand, carried spiritual meaning. Before entering any temple, Greeks performed a simple yet symbolic act, washing their hands and feet. The idea was that dirt from the streets, sweat from work, or even traces of daily life had no place in a sacred space. At the entrance of temples, there were often basins called periranteria, large marble bowls filled with clean water. Visitors would stop, dip their hands, and sprinkle themselves lightly. It was quiet, humble, and deeply meaningful. This small act turned them from ordinary mortals into purified participants in a divine experience. Cleanliness also shaped how the Greeks approached sacrifices, the most important religious acts of their lives. Before offering an animal or pouring wine to the gods, everyone involved had to be ritually clean. The priest would wash, sometimes fully bathe, before donning white garments. Those assisting would also wash their hands, a gesture symbolizing that they were free from impurity, or miasma, as the Greeks called it. Miasma was a central idea in Greek religion. It meant spiritual pollution, a stain on the soul that came from contact with things considered unclean, like blood, death, or childbirth. It wasn't visible like dirt, but it was believed to offend the gods and attract misfortune. Someone who had touched a corpse, for example, was seen as polluted until they had undergone cleansing. Even walking into a house where someone had recently died could bring miasma upon you. To stay clean meant to stay in balance with the divine order. This idea of miasma made purification a regular part of Greek life. Before festivals, processions, and even important decisions, people performed washing rituals. When a plague struck Athens, many believed it wasn't just a disease of the body but a punishment brought by spiritual uncleanliness, a sign that the city had fallen out of favor with the gods. So they turned to purification ceremonies, bathing in sacred waters and offering prayers to restore harmony. Women, too, had their own rituals of cleansing tied to major life events. After childbirth, a woman was considered ritually unclean for several days. It wasn't about shame, it was about restoring balance between the body and the divine. She would bathe, often with water drawn at dawn, and offer sacrifices to the household gods. Before marriage, brides also bathed in sacred springs to purify themselves and prepare for the new chapter of life. One famous example comes from Athens, where brides would wash in the waters of the Kalaro spring, believed to bring blessings and fertility. These moments weren't rushed or mechanical, they were almost poetic. Imagine a young bride standing by the edge of a spring at sunrise. The water is cool, the air still. She lowers a jug into the water, watches the ripples spread, and pours it gently over herself. That simple act was her way of saying to the gods, I begin this new life clean, in body, in mind, and in heart. Even the gods themselves weren't above the act of cleansing. Myths are full of stories showing how divine figures performed purification after committing violent or morally grey deeds. The god Apollo, for instance, had to cleanse himself after slaying the serpent Python at Delphi. He was said to have wandered for years seeking purification, eventually bathing in sacred waters and undergoing rituals to remove his miasma. This myth wasn't just a tale, it reflected a core belief that no one, not even the gods, could escape the need for spiritual balance. The same idea appeared in stories about heroes. Heracles, after many of his labors, had to purify himself before he could rejoin society. Even Orestes, who killed his own mother to avenge his father, wandered in torment until he was purified at Delphi. These myths taught that purification wasn't just about washing away physical dirt, it was a moral and emotional reset. Priests and temple attendants took purification especially seriously. Many lived under strict rules to maintain their sacred status. They had to avoid certain foods, stay away from funerals, and bathe regularly in clean water. Some temples, like those dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, had specific bathing areas where the priests performed daily rituals before conducting ceremonies. In some cases, purification wasn't limited to individuals. Whole cities could be washed clean. When Athens faced moral or political crises, priests would lead processions to the sea or rivers, sprinkling water along the way, symbolically cleansing the city. The sea itself, vast, powerful, and eternal, was seen as the ultimate purifier. To bathe in seawater was to reconnect with nature's purest element, the same water that touched every shore of the known world. The Greek world was full of sacred springs and fountains, each with its own reputation for purity. Delphi had the Castalian spring, where poets and prophets bathed before seeking divine inspiration. At Eleusis, initiates of the famous mysteries underwent a ritual washing before being allowed to take part in secret ceremonies. The act of bathing wasn't just preparation, it was transformation. It separated the everyday person from the one who could stand before gods. Even at home, purification was woven into daily life. Before meals or prayers, people washed their hands. Before handling offerings to the household deities, they cleansed themselves. Water, always flowing and renewing, was seen as the bridge between human imperfection and divine perfection. To the Greeks, being clean wasn't about being spotless, it was about being worthy. The hands that touched sacred altars had to be pure, the mind that prayed had to be calm, and the heart had to be in harmony with the divine. So when we imagine a Greek standing by a marble basin, washing hands before entering a temple, it's more than a simple routine. It's a gesture that connects them to something timeless, a quiet reminder that cleanliness is not only of the body, but of the soul. In ancient Greece, grooming was not just about looking good, it was about showing who you were. The way a person wore their hair, shaped their beard, or even smelled could reveal their status, character, and sense of discipline. Cleanliness and beauty were woven into identity, and both men and women took them seriously. For men, the barbershop, or karayan, was a central part of daily life. It wasn't like a quick haircut stop today, it was a place of conversation, debate, and gossip. Men gathered there not only to get their hair trimmed but to discuss politics, philosophy, and the latest news from the agora. Some even said you could learn more about what was happening in Athens from a barber's chair than from the assembly itself. Barbers in Greece were craftsmen of respect. They shaped curls, trimmed beards, and even applied oils or perfumes to finish the look. The sound of snipping shears, the scent of olive oil, and the steady hum of conversation made the barbershop a small social theater of Greek life. It wasn't just about vanity, it was about being part of the community. The topic of beards, however, was where things got philosophical, literally. Beards were symbols of masculinity, wisdom, and moral strength. In early Greek society, a man's beard was his pride. To cut it was an insult. Philosophers, especially, were known for their full, flowing beards. Think of Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle, all with serious faces framed by thick curls. The beard was a mark of contemplation and intellect, a quiet declaration that one cared more for ideas than appearances. But soldiers were a different story. They shaved. It was said that Alexander the Great made shaving popular among his troops, not for fashion, but for strategy. Long beards, he reasoned, were dangerous in battle, an enemy could grab them easily. So, out of practicality, soldiers began to shave, and soon, the clean-shaven face became a sign of discipline and strength. Over time, the beard became optional, a matter of choice that revealed what kind of man you wanted to appear to be, the thinker or the fighter. For women, grooming was an art form. Hairstyles varied by age, class, and even city-state. Young girls often wore their hair loose, a sign of innocence and freedom. Married women, however, tied theirs up in elaborate braids, buns, or coils, decorated with ribbons, pins, or even fresh flowers. Wealthy women used golden hairpins and ivory combs, while others made do with simpler wooden ones. Hair was washed with olive oil and scented with herbs like rosemary or thyme, leaving it soft and fragrant. In Athens, there was a famous style called the Corinthos, a high, elegant bun on the top of the head, sometimes covered with a fine net or veil. In Sparta, women were known to keep their hair longer and looser, symbolizing freedom and physical strength. Every style spoke, it said something about who you were and where you came from. Body hair was another subject of careful attention, especially for women. Smooth skin was admired, seen as a sign of beauty and refinement. To achieve it, they used all sorts of natural tools and mixtures. Pumice stones were rubbed over the skin to remove fine hairs. Some used resin or waxy pastes, early forms of waxing. Others mixed ashes with oil to make a rough scrub. It wasn't always painless, but beauty, even then, came with effort. Cosmetics, too, played an important role. Unlike modern makeup, Greek cosmetics were made entirely from natural materials, though not all of them were safe. Pale skin was considered elegant, a mark of status and gentleness, since tan skin suggested labor outdoors. To achieve that whiteness, women applied powders made from white lead or chalk, ingredients we now know were toxic. But in their eyes, it was worth it. To add color to their cheeks, they used crushed berries or red ochre. For lips, a hint of mulberry or wine. The eyes were darkened with kohl, made from soot or powdered minerals, giving them a soft, smoky look. Eyebrows were shaped with care, sometimes joined slightly in the middle to match the Greek idea of beauty at the time. Even perfume played its part. Scented oils dabbed behind the ears, wrists, and neck added a final touch of elegance. But beauty wasn't just skin-deep for the Greeks. Grooming was linked to the concept of kallikigathia, the harmony between inner goodness, agathos, and outer beauty, kalos. The idea was simple: if your soul was noble, your body should reflect it. Being clean, well-groomed, and composed wasn't vanity, it was virtue. Neglecting your appearance could suggest laziness or moral disorder. This belief made grooming a daily ritual of mindfulness. Men would oil their hair and beards carefully, inspecting themselves not with arrogance, but with pride and discipline. Women, in turn, took time to brush their hair, mix their perfumes, and prepare their faces not just to attract attention but to feel dignified and serene. Still, not everyone agreed on where grooming ended and vanity began. Philosophers like Socrates and Diogenes mocked the obsession with outward beauty. Diogenes once said that a clean cloak meant nothing if your soul was dirty. But for most Greeks, balance was the key, to be clean and beautiful, but not proud or excessive. Hairstyles and grooming also changed with time and politics. During times of war, simplicity was preferred. In eras of peace and prosperity, fashion flourished. Sculptures and pottery show how hairstyles evolved, from the short curls of early classical men to the elaborate ringlets of Hellenistic women. And while beauty standards have shifted through centuries, the Greeks left behind one timeless lesson. Cleanliness and grooming are not only about appearance, they are rituals of care. Each stroke of a comb, each drop of oil, was a small act of respect for oneself and for the world around. So imagine, for a moment, an Athenian morning. The market is just opening. The sun paints the marble buildings gold. A man sits in the barber's chair, debating philosophy as his beard is trimmed. Across the courtyard, a woman braids her hair, humming softly, her fingers moving with quiet grace. Both, in their own ways, are practicing the same thing, the Greek art of staying clean, composed, and human. In ancient Greece, a woman's world was mostly private, built around her home, her family, and her quiet routines. And among these daily rituals, bathing was one of the most intimate and cherished. Unlike the public baths where men gathered to debate and socialize, women's baths were smaller, quieter, and tucked away inside the household courtyard. These were places of calm, little sanctuaries filled with the soft sound of splashing water, the scent of herbs, and the faint glow of oil lamps flickering against stone walls. For most Greek women, bathing wasn't just about cleaning the body. It was a moment of pause, a brief escape from the demands of domestic life. Wealthy families had dedicated bathing rooms, often small circular chambers with stone tubs carved into the floor. Water was poured in from large clay jugs, warmed over a hearth, and mixed until it reached a comfortable temperature. The bathing space itself was modest but beautifully simple: smooth walls, terracotta tiles, and maybe a small window to let in a slice of light. Poorer families, however, didn't have such luxuries. They bathed using basins or small wooden tubs, often right in the kitchen or near a courtyard well. The process was slower, but the intention was the same: to refresh, to feel renewed, and to maintain that sense of dignity and grace that Greek society prized. For upper-class women, bathing often came with attendants. These attendants, usually enslaved women, played a vital role. They fetched water, tested its warmth, poured fragrant oils into the bath, and even helped scrub and dry their mistress's skin. Once the bath was over, they would carefully apply scented olive oil, the same kind used in temples and rituals, massaging it into the skin with gentle strokes. The oils weren't just for fragrance, they were for health. Olive oil softened the skin, protected it from the dry Mediterranean air, and was often infused with herbs like lavender, thyme, or myrtle for added freshness. Some women even used oil mixed with powdered minerals to give their skin a faint shimmer. A well-oiled complexion was seen as elegant, proof of leisure, refinement, and good care. In Greek art, women are often shown with smooth, pale skin, a clear symbol of beauty and virtue. Pale skin wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was a sign of status. Women who worked outdoors became tanned, which was associated with labor and poverty. So upper-class women, who stayed indoors and away from the sun, naturally had lighter skin. To maintain or exaggerate this look, some used white powders made from lead, chalk, or ground marble. Dangerous, yes, but effective in their eyes. Softness, too, was prized. Poets often compared women's skin to polished ivory or petals of lilies. And for this, regular bathing and oiling were essential. A Greek woman's beauty was thought to reflect her inner balance, her modesty, her discipline, her purity. Cleanliness wasn't vanity, it was a form of self-respect. Hygiene for women went beyond daily baths. It was also deeply connected to their body's natural rhythms: menstruation, childbirth, and motherhood. Though ancient records are scarce, we know that Greek women practiced menstrual hygiene with care and discretion. They used strips of soft wool or linen as absorbent material, which were washed and reused. They also cleansed themselves with water infused with herbs like sage or chamomile, both believed to have soothing and purifying effects. After childbirth, bathing took on a spiritual dimension. Women were considered unclean for a period after giving birth, not in a shameful way, but as part of a natural cycle that required purification before rejoining society or participating in religious rituals. After this period, the mother would bathe herself in warm water, sometimes mixed with sea salt or bay leaves, symbolizing cleansing and renewal. Some baths even held sacred meaning. Women preparing for marriage, for instance, would bathe in special water brought from holy springs, such as the Fountain of Calero in Athens. This was not just physical cleansing, it was a ritual of transformation. The water symbolized purity and readiness, a step from girlhood into womanhood. Perfume also played a role in these private rituals. Women stored small alabaster jars filled with aromatic oils, rose, myrrh, or iris. These scents clung to their skin and hair long after bathing, creating an aura of refinement and comfort. The perfume a woman wore said much about her personality. Some preferred delicate floral notes, while others chose warmer, musky blends made from resins and spices. And while men used oils mostly for physical vigor or athletic rituals, women used them for softness and calm, for that gentle presence that Greek culture often linked to grace. The difference was subtle but meaningful. Cleanliness for women was also tied to modesty and care for the household. A clean body reflected a clean home, a calm mind, and a balanced life. Philosophers, poets, and playwrights alike described the well-kept woman as an emblem of harmony, not because of extravagance, but because of order. Even the goddess Hera, queen of the gods, was celebrated for her radiance, said to come from the divine baths she took in the waters of Kanatos each year to renew her youth. And yet, despite these rituals of refinement, Greek women were practical. Their beauty routines, while detailed, often used what nature provided: olive oil, herbs, ash, sea salt, and flowers. In this, they carried an ancient wisdom, that the simplest things could create the greatest comfort. Imagine a quiet evening in an Athenian home. The day's light fades into gold. A woman sits by a basin as her attendant pours warm water over her shoulders. The scent of myrtle fills the air. She hums softly, eyes half closed, the world outside fading away. Her hair is loose, her skin gleaming with oil, her thoughts calm. For a few precious moments, she isn't a wife, or mother, or hostess, she's simply human, clean and serene, embraced by the quiet ritual that has soothed countless women before her. In the end, these private baths were more than hygiene. They were acts of peace, small, sacred pauses in a world that expected much from them. Through water and oil, scent and softness, Greek women found their own version of purity, not just of the body, but of the soul. When we picture ancient Greek cleanliness, marble baths and fragrant oils often come to mind. Yet beneath the polished exterior of Athenian life lay a far humbler, and sometimes unpleasant, reality. Public sanitation was rudimentary by modern standards. Most households relied on simple chamber pots, emptied into the street or communal waste pits under cover of night. In wealthier homes, you might find stone or terracotta seats with drainage channels leading outside, but these were luxuries, not norms. In the bustling quarters of Athens or Corinth, human waste often mingled with refuse in open gutters that snaked along the streets, an early, imperfect form of sewage system. Rainwater carried the waste downhill, but in dry months, the stench was difficult to ignore. Still, compared to many ancient civilizations, the Greeks took the problem seriously. City planners designed drainage channels and sewers, especially near public baths and fountains, to keep urban centers livable. As for personal hygiene, the Greeks had an unusual tool, the xylospongium, or sponge stick. After defecation, individuals used a sea sponge attached to a stick, dipped in water or vinegar, to clean themselves. These were communal in public latrines, shared among users after rinsing, a practice that makes one grateful for modern toilet paper. Despite these humble facilities, the Greeks recognized the link between cleanliness and health. Philosophers like Hippocrates wrote about the importance of sanitation for preventing disease, while city laws sometimes prohibited dumping waste too close to water sources. When the Romans later perfected sewer systems and public latrines, they built upon the Greeks' early experiments. The Greek concern for order, hygiene, and harmony, even in waste management, laid the groundwork for Rome's advanced sanitation marvels. In the end, Greek cleanliness wasn't just about oils, baths, or perfumes. It extended, however imperfectly, to every corner of life, from the sacred springs to the city gutters, reflecting a culture striving for balance between beauty and practicality, purity and reality. Cleanliness was not just a matter of beauty or ritual for the Greeks, it was deeply tied to health and survival. Yet, even in a culture that revered bathing and balance, disease was an unavoidable part of life. Ancient Greek cities, especially crowded ones like Athens, were breeding grounds for ailments linked to poor sanitation and limited medical understanding. Common diseases. Infection and epidemics often spread through unclean water, shared baths, and primitive waste systems. Skin diseases, parasites, and intestinal disorders were frequent visitors in Greek homes. The infamous plague of Athens, 430 BCE, decimated the population during the Peloponnesian War, a grim reminder of how easily illness could spread in dense, poorly sanitized environments. Hippocrates and cleanliness. The father of medicine, Hippocrates of Kos, was among the first to connect hygiene with health. His theories revolved around the balance of four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and he believed that cleanliness helped maintain this equilibrium. He prescribed baths, exercise, proper diet, and fresh air as the foundation for a healthy life, centuries before germs were discovered. Bathing as therapy. Baths were more than relaxation, they were treatments. Physicians recommended warm or cold baths to restore balance or ease specific conditions like fever, muscle pain, or melancholy. The Greeks even developed hydrotherapy, using water's temperature and movement for healing, a concept still relevant in modern spa and wellness practices. When cleanliness spread illness. Ironically, the same public baths that symbolized purity often became sources of disease. With many sharing the same water, bacterial infections and skin conditions circulated easily. Despite their efforts at maintaining cleanliness with oils and scrapers, the lack of soap and proper drainage meant the baths were rarely as hygienic as they appeared. Folk remedies and natural cures. In the absence of advanced medicine, Greeks turned to nature. Olive oil soothed skin and wounds, honey acted as an antiseptic, vinegar served as a disinfectant, and herbs like thyme, oregano, and chamomile were brewed into tonics. Physicians blended these ingredients into poultices, ointments, and infusions, combining practical knowledge with divine faith in healing gods like Asclepius. In essence, ancient Greek medicine was a delicate dance between rational observation and spiritual belief. Cleanliness was both a health strategy and a moral ideal, proof that the Greeks understood, long before science confirmed it, that the state of the body reflects the harmony, or chaos, within. For the Greeks, the bath wasn't just a place to wash away the dust and sweat of the day, it was a stage for conversation, gossip, philosophy, and even politics. Inside those steamy stone chambers, the lines between cleanliness, culture, and power blurred in fascinating ways. In a Greek city, the bathhouse was one of the few places where everyone eventually crossed paths: the rich, the poor, athletes, merchants, philosophers, and statesmen. Though class and decorum still existed, the shared ritual of bathing created a space where social barriers softened, if only for a little while. A merchant might strike up a conversation with a local poet. A philosopher might challenge a general's opinion about virtue. A noble might quietly bribe a city official while pretending to admire the marble floors. Conversations, gossip, and deals. The Greek bathhouse was like an ancient version of a cafe, office, and social club combined. While scrubbing or oiling themselves, men exchanged the latest news: who was winning in the agora, who offended which god, or which statesman might be plotting something shady. In fact, some minor political alliances were born in these humid corners. A sly whisper over a jar of olive oil could turn into an agreement that shaped an election or trade deal. Bath attendance and hierarchy. Despite the sense of equality, the bathhouse still reflected Greek social order. The balneus, or bath attendant, managed the space, heating water, cleaning basins, and providing towels or oils. They often came from lower classes or were enslaved workers, yet they held subtle power. After all, they overheard everything. The best attendants knew who preferred warm water, who brought fine oils, and who came merely to eavesdrop. They were the unseen chroniclers of Greek society, part servant, part gossip columnist. We can imagine how the experience varied across class lines. Wealthy citizens arrived with their own personal slaves to scrub and oil them, while ordinary men made do with shad basins and rough clay scrubs. The wealthy left smelling like roses and cinnamon, others, like olive oil and effort. But in the end, everyone left the same, clean, relaxed, and ready to face the world again. Philosophers and the moral bath. To Greek thinkers, the bathhouse wasn't only about the body, it was a symbol of spiritual and moral cleansing. Philosophers like Socrates and Diogenes often used bathing as a metaphor for purifying the soul. Just as dirt and oil cling to the skin, they said, greed and arrogance cling to the spirit. To wash away physical grime was easy, to cleanse the heart of pride or ignorance was the real challenge. Some teachers even held informal lessons in the bathhouses, speaking about moderation and virtue as the steam rose around them. It must have been quite a sight, a group of half-oiled philosophers arguing about the meaning of purity while a line of sweaty athletes waited impatiently for their turn. Comedic and scandalous stories. Greek playwrights loved to poke fun at bathhouse culture. In comedies by Aristophanes, bathhouses were often scenes of chaos and humor, slippery floors, misplaced towels, and gossip that spread faster than the steam. Jokes about bath attendants, vain men preening in mirrors, or mischievous encounters behind steamy curtains were common. These plays revealed a lighter side of Greek cleanliness, one full of flirtation, rivalry, and absurdity. After all, when people shared closed spaces with little clothing and plenty of chatter, stories and scandals were bound to bubble up. More than a place to wash. When we think about it, the Greek bathhouse represented everything the ancient Greeks valued: community, conversation, beauty, health, and even philosophy. It was where ideas were born, reputations were made, and secrets were exchanged. In a world without smartphones, newspapers, or coffee shops, the bathhouse was the social heartbeat of the city. People didn't just clean their bodies there, they renewed their minds, reshaped opinions, and reconnected with one another. So when a Greek stepped out of the bathhouse, gleaming with olive oil and confidence, they weren't just refreshed, they were recharged, part of a living tradition that celebrated both body and soul. In ancient Greece, water wasn't just something to drink or bathe in. It was alive, a sacred force that connected mortals and gods. Every drop, whether from a river, a spring, or the vast Aegean Sea, carried spiritual meaning. To the Greeks, water could purify, protect, and even punish. It wasn't simply about being clean, it was about being worthy. Throughout the year, Greek life revolved around festivals, grand events that blended religion, community, and celebration. And almost every major festival began with some kind of ritual washing. This cleansing wasn't only physical, it was about removing invisible stains of sin, bad luck, or misfortune. Before stepping into a temple or joining a procession, people washed their hands, their feet, and sometimes their entire bodies. Take the Panathenaea, for example, one of the most important festivals in Athens, held in honor of the goddess Athena. Before the grand parade, before the athletic games, before the sacrifices, Athenians purified themselves in water. Even the statue of Athena Polias, the protector of the city, was washed in a sacred ritual. Priests and priestesses carefully carried the statue to the sea or a special basin, gently cleaning it with seawater and oils, while hymns echoed through the air. This wasn't just maintenance of a sacred image, it was a renewal of divine presence. To the Greeks, washing the statue symbolized washing the entire city clean, preparing Athens itself to begin anew. Across Greece, similar rituals unfolded for other gods. The statue of Hera at Argos was bathed in the Inachus River every year. At Delphi, pilgrims washed themselves before approaching Apollo's oracle, ensuring their bodies and souls were free of impurity. Even humble household shrines received a small sprinkle of water before offerings were made. But it wasn't only the gods who were washed, sometimes the worshippers themselves became part of the sacred cleansing. Before the Olympic Games, athletes bathed in the river Alpheos, letting the current wash away dust, sweat, and any sense of unworthiness. They didn't just want strong bodies, they wanted pure spirits, ready to honor Zeus through their strength. The same idea extended to soldiers before battle, brides before marriage, and even mourners before funerals. Each life event had its own form of washing, its own symbolic reset. The Greeks understood that water was dual in nature, gentle yet powerful, nurturing yet destructive. The sea, especially, held a deep symbolic pull. It was home to Poseidon, god of earthquakes and waves, whose moods could shift from calm to chaos in an instant. To enter the sea before a sacred event was to step into Poseidon's realm, to borrow a bit of his might while surrendering to his will. In myth, the sea was both a cleanser and a destroyer. It washed away the filth of the world but also swallowed cities whole. The Nereids, daughters of Nereus, were the gentle spirits of the sea, symbols of healing and rebirth. Meanwhile, the Naiads, nymphs of rivers and springs, embodied the purity of fresh water. People believed they could bless those who bathed in their waters, or curse those who polluted them. This belief in sacred water shaped how Greeks interacted with nature. A stream wasn't just a resource, it was a living temple. People whispered prayers before drawing water, dropped flowers into wells, and left small offerings near springs. Even the act of washing clothes could become a quiet ritual if done near a sacred source. The connection between festivals, ritual washing, and the body showed something essential about Greek culture. The human body itself was sacred. It was the vessel through which people honored the gods. To neglect it was almost a form of disrespect. To cleanse it, carefully, reverently, was to say, I am part of something divine. So when festival day came, and thousands gathered beneath marble temples and open skies, the scent of olive oil, sea salt, and incense mingled in the air. Clean faces shone in the sunlight. The gods were watching, and the people, freshly purified, were ready to meet their gaze. In a way, every Greek festival was a reminder of a simple truth: to be clean was to be close to the divine. And in washing away the dust of life, the Greeks believed they could, even if for a moment, touch eternity. When it came to the idea of staying clean, the ancient Greeks didn't stop at real life, they wove it deep into their myths and legends. To them, stories weren't just entertainment, they were lessons, mirrors reflecting the values and fears of their world. And in those stories, cleanliness often meant something far greater than soap and water. It meant renewal, forgiveness, and transformation. Let's start with one of the most famous cleansing stories of all, the labors of Heracles. Everyone remembers his feats of strength, but few pause to notice how one of those tasks was, quite literally, about cleaning up a mess. When King Eurystheus ordered Heracles to clean the Augean stables, it wasn't just a test of muscle, it was symbolic. The stables housed thousands of cattle and hadn't been cleaned in decades. The filth was unimaginable. Most men would have wept at the sight, but Heracles found a clever solution. Instead of shoveling dung by hand, he redirected the flow of two rivers, the Alpheos and the Peneos, to wash out the stables completely. In one day, the rivers swept away years of decay. It wasn't just a victory of strength, it was a moment of purification through nature. Water, again, was the hero's ally, the element that erased impurity and restored balance. This myth captures a key Greek idea: cleansing wasn't only physical. It was moral and spiritual. Heracles didn't just wash away dirt, he symbolically washed away neglect, restoring order to chaos. His labor wasn't glamorous, but it was deeply meaningful. In Greek thought, there was something honorable about cleaning, about restoring harmony to what had fallen into ruin. Then there's the story of Aphrodite, perhaps the most beautiful goddess of them all. Unlike Heracles, her cleansing moment wasn't about dirt, but about divine birth. She was said to have emerged from the foam of the sea, Aphros in Greek, near the island of Cyprus. The waves carried her gently to shore, and as she rose, dripping with sea foam, flowers bloomed along the sand. This image, the goddess of love born from the sea, spoke volumes to the Greeks. The sea was wild, unpredictable, and vast, yet from it came beauty and purity. Aphrodite's birth symbolized the way that even from chaos, something perfect and clean could emerge. She was the embodiment of divine purity, untouched by mortal flaws, forever renewed by the sea that gave her life. In another story, cleanliness took on a different tone, one of comfort, rest, and homecoming. When Odysseus, weary from years of wandering, finally reached safe shores, baths often marked his moments of renewal. In Homer's Odyssey, whenever Odysseus or his companions were offered hospitality, the first act of kindness was usually a warm bath. It wasn't just about removing the salt and sweat of travel, it was a symbolic washing away of hardship. One of the most touching scenes comes near the end of the epic, when Odysseus returns home in disguise. Before he reveals himself, he's bathed by his old nurse, Eurycleia. As she washes his legs, she recognizes a scar from his youth, a moment that connects his worn, weary present with his innocent past. That bath becomes a bridge between who he was and who he's become. It's not just a cleansing of his body, but a rebirth of his identity. Throughout Greek myth, bathing, washing, or purification often marked a turning point, a change from one state of being to another. When heroes returned from battle, when gods punished or forgave, when mortals sought redemption, there was almost always water involved. Even the gods themselves were bound by the rules of purity. After Apollo killed the serpent Python, he was struck with miasma, the spiritual pollution that came from shedding blood. To cleanse himself, he traveled to the sacred valley of Tempe to undergo purification. Only after washing in the river and making offerings could he return to Delphi and reclaim his role as the god of prophecy. That story says something profound about the Greek worldview. Even the divine must respect the balance of purity. No one, not even a god, was above the need for cleansing. Cleanliness and impurity in mythology weren't simply about good and evil. They were about balance and harmony, two forces that constantly shaped the Greek understanding of the world. Dirt, decay, and chaos weren't enemies. They were reminders of how fragile order was, and how much effort it took to keep the world, and the soul, clean. The myths of Heracles, Aphrodite, and Odysseus each show a different side of this truth. Heracles teaches us that cleansing restores order. Aphrodite reminds us that purity can rise from chaos. And Odysseus shows that washing can mark a gentle homecoming, a moment of rediscovery. To the Greeks, these weren't just bedtime stories. They were reflections of daily life, of washing before a sacrifice, of scrubbing away sweat after the gymnasium, of bathing before visiting a temple. Every act of cleanliness echoed the same ancient belief, that to be clean wasn't just to look good, but to honor the divine within and around you. Even now, thousands of years later, when someone stands beneath a shower and feels the stress of the day wash away, that quiet sense of renewal, that deep breath after cleansing, is something the ancient Greeks would have understood perfectly. When we think of ancient baths, those grand, echoing marble halls filled with steam and chatter, our minds often go straight to Rome. The Roman thermae, with their vast pools, heated floors, and elegant mosaics, have become the stuff of legend. But behind all that luxury and engineering stood the quiet influence of the Greeks, the true pioneers of bathing as both an art and a philosophy. Long before Roman engineers perfected the flow of water through aqueducts and carved out vast public bathhouses, the Greeks had already built the foundation, not just in stone, but in spirit. To the Greeks, cleanliness was never merely about washing off dirt. It was a moral act, a reflection of harmony between body and soul. And that idea seeped, quite literally, into Roman culture. The Romans were practical people. They admired Greek sophistication but loved to improve upon it. When Greek colonies spread through southern Italy, in places like Naples and Sicily, their customs spread too. Romans began to adopt the Greek balaneia, small, steamy bath chambers where citizens gathered not only to bathe but to think, talk, and relax. Soon, what began as a humble Greek tradition evolved into something monumental under Roman hands. But while Rome made baths bigger, warmer, and grander, the heart of the experience remained deeply Greek, the idea that cleanliness was connected to civility. The Greeks taught that caring for the body was a form of discipline, not vanity. A clean, well-kept body reflected an ordered mind. A person who washed, groomed, and cared for themselves wasn't shallow, they were balanced. This belief came from a simple, yet profound philosophy, kallikagathia, the unity of beauty and goodness. To be beautiful on the outside meant striving to be good on the inside. The gymnasium, the oils, the perfumes, the baths, all of these rituals were part of maintaining that harmony. The Romans inherited that moral link between outer cleanliness and inner virtue, and it quietly shaped Western thought for centuries to come. Even in language, we still feel the echo of that Greek idea. The old saying, "Cleanliness is next to godliness," may sound biblical, but its roots go back much further. to those marble courtyards in Athens, where philosophers spoke of the soul's purity reflecting in the body's care. For the Greeks, washing wasn't just about the skin. It was about washing away excess, arrogance, and impurity of thought. When the Romans built their great bath complexes, the baths of Caracalla, of Diocletian, of Trajan, they weren't just providing a public service. They were continuing a cultural inheritance. In every heated pool and scented oil, in every quiet conversation over warm water, there was a trace of Greek thought. The Roman ideal of the healthy, disciplined citizen came straight from Greek teachings, the same ones that linked hygiene, health, and harmony. In time, this Greco-Roman ideal traveled even further. It shaped early Christian rituals of baptism, which took the symbolic act of cleansing and gave it new spiritual meaning. It influenced Renaissance artists, who rediscovered Greek sculpture and the balance of physical perfection with moral grace. And even today, every time someone associates a clear, fresh body with a calm, clear mind, they are echoing ideas first whispered by Greek poets and philosophers thousands of years ago. Imagine, for a moment, standing in one of those old Greek courtyards. The sun is setting behind the marble columns, the light soft and golden. A faint scent of olive oil lingers in the air. Somewhere nearby, a fountain trickles, the sound slow and steady. You've just washed, your skin warm from the water, your thoughts quiet. The world feels simple, balanced, clean. This was what the Greeks understood so well, that cleansing the body could cleanse the spirit. That water, oil, and air were not just elements, but companions in the rhythm of being alive. They taught the Romans that civilization wasn't built only with stone and law, but also with rituals of renewal, with the small daily acts that keep both people and cities in harmony. And maybe that's why, even now, a quiet bath can feel like a return to something ancient, something we've always known deep down. In the end, the Greeks didn't just teach the world how to stay clean. They taught us how to feel clean, in body, in mind, and in soul. And as the last light fades over that imagined courtyard, and the olive trees sway gently in the breeze, you can almost hear it, the whisper of an old truth, carried through centuries of water and stone. A clean body reflects a clean soul. And so, as the ancient Greeks drifted to sleep under the hum of the Mediterranean breeze, they dreamed not of dirt or disease, but of harmony, the balance between body, soul, and water. Perhaps tonight, we can do the same.